Before we begin, I just wanted to welcome all of you once again. And of course, thank you for joining me in this practice, where we seem to create a really beautiful momentum that seems to take us through our day. Even in the website, I've mentioned I invite most of you to join us at the start of this practice, at this point, so that we can just spend a few moments arriving. And I always find that in a practice such as this, especially when it begins at about this time, when many hours have passed since we awoken, we've already managed to build up a little bit of momentum in our day. And so there's already been movement in the mind. A little bit of background on what I'm referring to. Many meditation teachers, facilitators, they speak about spending a few moments first thing in the morning, just grounding ourselves, grounding yourself. Because apparently it's the easiest time to practice meditation, because the momentum of the mind is at its slowest, just because it's been resting during the night. Maybe still dreaming, yes. But nevertheless, it reaches its slowest point as we sleep. It gives us that rest. And perhaps by mentioning this, I'm also perhaps letting you know that that is a very good time to just take a few moments. It can be 1 minute, it can be 2 minutes, it can be just 3 minutes, just as you wake up or right after you wake up in the morning. Just setting the foundation for your day. There's a very interesting story. I know I talk a lot, but this is how we usually start this practice. I just talk you into the practice, just so that the practice feels natural. There's no start, there's no end. This practice of mindfulness is one in which it tries to blend our day-to-day activities into this sitting that we are about to do together, about to be together. And then perhaps in an hour, we'll be getting up and going about our normal activities, work, food, those usual things that we get about to. But this is a practice where we try to blend the two worlds together so that they become one. And so one of the teachers that I listen to very often, she likens the practice, she likens our daily lives to a journey that we have to make. Let's just pretend it's a 20-mile journey and we need the car. Okay, I don't know if all of you drive, but just assume you need a car or some form of transport. And so you wake up, and then you begin to realize that you have to make this journey. You have to get to, I'm in South London, so I'm going to say I need to get to North London within the next few hours. And then I get all excited and all perhaps even a little bit stressed because I need to get there as soon as possible. But I know that I need my car keys or I need my train ticket in order to make this journey. And this is a very practical example. This is what our daily lives are like. You need to make a journey. You need the car keys. You need the train ticket. And occasionally you lose it. You can't find it. But have you noticed that almost every single one of us, we won't begin the journey by foot because we know we're going to only get there 7, 8 hours later, maybe even 12 hours if we had to walk the whole journey. And so we will take the time, we will do everything that we can to find the spare set of keys, find the train ticket, find the money to buy a new train ticket. I'm assuming our wallet is also missing. But we take that time because it's going to help us get to that destination at a much faster rate. Or we're going to miss those meetings, we're going to miss those appointments. And so this teacher, she reminded us that meditation is like the key. It's very much like that car key. It's very much like that train ticket. It's as important because it's going to transform our whole experience during the day. And so just as in our real life, we would not embark on the journey without first finding these keys, finding that train ticket, because we know it's going to cut our journey down in half. We're going to avoid all those potholes. We're going to just get there as quickly and as comfortably and as peacefully as possible. And that's how she summed up meditation. It gives us that clarity. It changes the way in which we react towards the world around us. It sets the very foundation and the basis for all our relationships. And sometimes it also helps us with timing. And I think we all know that timing is everything. You could apply to a particular company for a particular job at the wrong time and not get it. Or you could apply at the right, perfect time and get it. I have a child upstairs, and I know that I could ask him to do a particular chore or a piece of homework or something like that. I could do it at the wrong time and get nothing done. Or I could do it at the right time and get everything done. And it's a little bit difficult to sometimes comprehend these things, but we all have noticed in our own lives how timing can often be of the essence. Even when you want to assist someone, there's a time when they will be, whether it's mental illness or physical illness of some form, there will be that moment when they are receptive and that moment when they are not. And when we approach them at that time when they are not receptive, we push them away. And so according to some of these teachers, by finding this key before we embark on the journey, that's one of the ways in which it transforms our daily experiences. And each one of these experiences, they're little, small, almost insignificant experiences. But nothing is insignificant in this practice. Where the timing is perfect, where the timing is right. Very often it's just that inspiration that we have to just pick up the phone and call a particular person at a particular time, or smile at a stranger on a bus or on the streets, that can have the largest impact. I know every single one of us, we want to do something amazing. I do believe that if we are here in this meditation room, we care a great deal about uplifting those around us in some way. And sometimes we make these targets a bit large. We want to stop world hunger. We want to end homelessness. But this is a practice where you notice the tiny things, and you might begin by just instinctively feeding a single person on the street whom you pass, just a single person. Because when you think about the big picture, ending homelessness, when you think about the big picture, helping every refugee in the world, it becomes too heavy a burden, and we wind up not even beginning to try because it seems hopeless. But those of you who have practiced with me before, you know that this is a practice where we move from moment to moment. Every moment becoming a now moment. And so every gesture, every move, every word becomes significant, very significant. Earlier we spoke about instinctively wanting to smile at a stranger or picking up the phone to call someone. When in tune, when feeling aligned, we have no idea how this can impact that other person if they were having suicidal thoughts or feeling extremely lonely or depressed. A single smile can make the biggest difference. They might be a charity worker for some refugee organization. They might be someone serving those homeless people or those starving people that you want to help. And so through a single smile that you have instinctively shared, you have made the world a better place. And that's what this practice is about. It's about just taking small steps forward. I've probably spoken more than I usually do in this practice. So if you like, I'm going to ring the bell, and we'll allow the bell to be the doorway. The doorway that will lead us from that conversation we just had, which may have stimulated your thoughts. But that's life. We're constantly being stimulated, aren't we? With the news, with social media, with those conversations around us. And so we create a doorway through the bell into this moment, into this new segment of the day, where we will simply arrive, so that we may enter into this practice, which is perhaps far more simple than any practice you have ever done in your life. I know that you came here to perhaps attend a meditation session or a mindfulness session. But I really do believe that these are just labels. Labels that sometimes lead us to have expectations, to build up an image of something that we would like to experience. And so we release these images. We release these labels so that we do only two things in our practice today. Two things that we are so familiar with. We sit. And of course, if you're lying down, that's absolutely fine as well. What I mean is we sit, we lie down, whatever form our physical posture is taking. We know how to sit, we know how to lie down. No effort required. We're going to do that. We're going to be that. And breathing. As I say breathing, I know for a moment with all that conversation, we almost totally forgot that we were breathing. Yet it seemed to continuously unfold in the background. Almost as though the breath was witnessing the conversation that was taking place. And so we are going to breathe. And in the process, still this vessel, this body, this form, this container within which we seem to keep our mind, our brain, our different organs, our muscle, our bone, all wrapped up in the skin that seems to cover us from head to toe. And so when I ring the bell, just arrive. Arrive into this new point in time that is the now, this present moment. And then arrive at this exact spot that you find your body in. Seated and listening to my voice in front of your computer or your device. You can use your breath. And when I say breath, I refer to the sensations around and within every breath, entering and leaving your body. And then your form, your body resting on your chair, on your cushion, on the mat, on the mattress. Arriving more fully, noticing those points of contact between your body and the surface underneath it. Relaxing your muscles and surrendering them to the forces of gravity. And what does gravity do? It just seems to cradle and bring all forms to a rest, into a sense of greater ease. And so your shoulders drop, your joints, your elbows, your knees, they loosen themselves. The muscles around your eyes, at the back of your eyes, they too loosen themselves. And so we refer to the muscles. We often also ignore. A loosening of the scalp. Noticing the sense of balance your body is achieving as the head rests upon the neck, and in particular the bone at the back of the neck, the upper end of the spinal column, how the head seems to balance itself, and then how the whole spinal column seems to balance itself on the pelvic bone. Leaving our muscles with very little to do. And so, are there any other muscles that you would like to surrender to gravity? The pelvic region, the legs. Feeling your whole body rest upon the surface underneath you, which is one of the most vivid indicators that we have arrived at this particular point of the room that you currently find yourself in. And we have established that our bodies have arrived, haven't we? And this is where we want to discover where the mind is. Because like a pail of water, a container, we've steadied the pail after a lot of movement. We have been moving around today, haven't we? And so even as we put the pail down, even as we rest our bodies and bring it to this point of the room where it is still, there's still movement in the contents of this pail. The water is still waving about, just like the mind, because of the momentum, because of the distance we've carried it. We carried it through this past few hours of the morning. There was so many different experiences. I don't know if you live alone or you have people around you, but each one of these experiences, whether it's the news, conversation, those chores you had to do, they all created a little wave in this bucket, and it's continuing to move. And in essence, that's what our practice is about. We're just here to observe this movement. But did you notice that the pail, the longer you keep it stable, the longer you allow it to just be in one particular point, the rocking and the rolling within it gently begins to slow down. Depending on how much momentum was picked up, of course. And don't you wish that the mind was as simple? That it was only these past few hours of momentum that would matter, but it's a little bit different with the mind because it's the momentum from last night, day before yesterday, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, and the whole lifetime. Sometimes lifetimes, if you believe in that sort of thing. And so there is momentum. Each one of us carrying a different degree of momentum. But in today's practice, we're going to begin by observing this momentum. By not only becoming aware that we are the pail, but maybe even stepping outside of the pail so that you become that whole space around the pail, observing the body and its form, observing the contents, the mind, the thoughts, the beliefs. And one interesting thing that you will begin to notice, I'm assuming most of your eyes are closed. Doesn't matter if they are closed or not, but if your eyes are closed, it's a little bit difficult to figure out where your body ends, isn't it? You can activate your skin, but it's still a little bit difficult to draw the line. And so if you could imagine the pail, okay, you begin by identifying yourself as the water in the pail, and it's very choppy, it's moving up and down. And then from a pail, it becomes, if you, with your eyes closed, your form, it dissolves from the border of the pail, it becomes a pond. And then the very same momentum, it feels a little less, doesn't it? The waves, the choppiness, it's spread over a larger surface. It becomes less significant. And from a pond, stepping back a little bit further, becoming a lake. Oh my goodness, I can hardly even detect those little ripples that seemed like high waves when I was the bucket. Less significant. They matter less now. And I step back a little further, or maybe not back, but up, becoming a larger lake. Maybe the sea, the ocean. That momentum is can hardly notice. And we rest in this. Many of the challenges, many of the obstacles we once believed we were facing, whether in relationships, in finances, health, they can sometimes feel so much bigger when we attempt to remain as that little bucket with its rigid form. But as we step into this space that's so much more vast, it's where many of the solutions are. It's where the clarity is. It's where the wisdom and the understanding is. And sometimes it may not be immediately clear or apparent. But we look out for those baby steps we were talking about at the beginning, whether to turn right or whether to turn left. Sometimes it might be Googling a particular page, being inspired to. It might be the inspiration to pick up a particular book, read something, speak to someone, attend a practice. And gently the jigsaw falls into place. The answers that were always there simply resurface. And so where is your mind right now? That's what our practice is partially about. Observing the mind. Not forcing it to go still. The more you fight your thoughts, just like the laws of physics, the thoughts push back. Because this is a world in which all the laws of science are equally applicable. And a very nice way of seeing this in practice is I'd like you to listen to your surroundings. We're all in different rooms, different parts of the world. I can hear some traffic outside my window. I don't know if you can hear it. But what can you hear in your own space? Maybe it's silence. Maybe it's something else. My reason for asking you to activate your sense of hearing is simply for you to notice whether any of these sounds are disturbing or distracting you. Are they spoiling your practice in any way? Because I know we let go of those labels to meditate, to be mindful. But ultimately when we embark on a practice such as this, there's almost certainly an expectation that there be a reasonable amount of silence. Is there a dog barking in the distance or a car alarm? Car alarms can be quite annoying. Or for me, the recycling truck just passed by and it made a lot of noise with the lifting up of bins and footsteps. If there is, or voices, yes, voices, of course, because voices, when you hear voices, the words sometimes make sense, and then you begin to listen in to the meaning of those sounds. But this is a practice of allowing. And so every one of these distractions, these disturbances, they are a gift in our practice. Because it's simply an indication that there is something in this present moment that we are not allowing. If it is a sound, for example, the car alarm, the mind begins a chatter. It begins to push against that sound and say, I want you to go away. I am meditating, I am practicing, and there should be silence. And then the law of physics comes in, because you push against the sound. The sound pushes against us in equal measure, in equal force. And that begins a whole dialogue and interruption, disturbance. And this is a practice where we step aside like the matador and the bull and allow it to flow past us. We give permission. Gracefully, kindly, we give permission to the sound to exist. And if you find that difficult and challenging, then just remember that your body, you can use science. Remember that your body is simply made up of atoms and molecules. And what do you think is in between these atoms and molecules? Nothing but space, empty space. Which means there's a lot of space to allow these vibrating sound waves to travel through the body. And so we give permission. And this practice of allowing sound, allowing distractions, is simply a training ground so that it may teach us how to allow our thoughts, allow those waves, those ripples at the top of the bucket that was moving. The more we allow, the more we step up and back and become that pond, and then become that lake, and then become that ocean where it no longer disturbs us. But it's still there. But we have that ability to observe, to notice and simply witness. And as we step into this space, where there is an infinite amount of patience, where every moment becomes the first moment, every breath becomes the only breath, where we step outside of our minds, where time is of less importance, because there is only a single moment. And that moment is this moment. Where we find ourselves doing nothing more than sitting, and breathing. In a moment I'll ring the bell, and this is just going to be an opportunity to stretch your bodies. But we will continue with the practice in a moment, but just so that you may stretch your bodies. But even this, even these movements that you are about to execute after you hear the bell, you can turn them into a part of the practice. You might be scanning through your body, looking for which part of the body could most benefit from a stretch or a new posture or a movement. There are certain parts that are feeling a little bit tight. And then if you notice in your mind, you might begin to imagine your hands reaching out to a particular point. Or you might imagine the new posture that you would like to adopt. You might want to lie down, and then you've already formed the image in your mind of yourself lying down or your arms stretched out straight. And so when you execute your movement, you're trying to get to that end. That means that end is the stretched out arms or that new posture. But what we are going to do, or rather what we are going to be, I keep using the word do. This is a practice about being, isn't it? Is we're going to notice every single process on the journey towards that end. Right from where you find your body right now, it begins, doesn't it, with one muscle stretching, the other one contracting on the other side. And it becomes an unfolding, a moment to moment unfolding, just like a flower bud blooming, petal by petal, until the full bloom has been reached And those of us who love flowers, I think we all recognize that tendency within each and every one of us that wants to see the flower only in full bloom. We want to see our body at the end that we envision, but not everything in between. And so you will hear the bell. I think you understand what I mean. See if you can tap into all the subtleties within the body as movement unfolds. Settling back into whatever posture it is. Whether the new posture or the old posture, and whether or not you moved. Any sense of relief. Or simply allowing it all, allowing in all that you have experienced. And in this final part of the practice, we will do a visualization practice. And as I mentioned, we might stretch beyond 1:30 a little bit, but please feel free to leave at any point if you did timetable this practice in. We'll give the mind something to do now. Perhaps first recognizing the mind as a separate entity from us. I once had a teacher who said that life is a game, play it, and do not take it too seriously. And so we can turn this into a little game where we give the mind a toy to play with. A toy in the form of a visualization. Because the mind doesn't like to be bored, does it? It's so full of activity and excitement and sometimes those darker bits. And so we will give it a visualization and use the mind as a tool in this practice. And so we will bring into our mind's eye. I hope with all the lovely weather we've had outside, you've managed to at least make it out into a small garden and see a bit of greenery, even if it's through your window. But this is a visualization where we will bring into the mind's eye the image of a tree, and we'll make it a rather large tree that's been here for a very long time, indicating a degree of stability, a degree of presence, just like this witnessing presence that we have been tapping into. Despite the changes around us, despite the changes around the tree. And so it has a pretty large trunk, which embeds itself into the earth with roots running deep into the crust of the earth. And with our mind's eye, we will begin to merge our bodies into this image. What's probably more relevant and important in this practice is the qualities of the tree, and absorbing these qualities into our bodies. And so once again, noticing those points of contact underneath our body. And allowing the cushions, the mats, the chairs underneath us, perhaps even the carpet, to absorb our bodies so that form dissolves into each other. And you begin to feel the stability of being grounded into the stillness of the surface underneath your body. And you're beginning to understand your right to exist. Nothing more, just the right to exist. To be as you are, no different. In the space that we call the now. This may be a good moment to remind ourselves that there is only perfection. For there are no standards to which we may compare ourselves to. No standard in the past, no standard in the future. And just as the tree, that somehow, through its wisdom over the years, seems to understand the texture on the bark, the scale of its size, your arms, your hair, your head becoming the branches of this great tree, your trunk becoming the core, of this ancient presence. Just as the tree knows how to rest, why don't you scan through your body? Just as the tree seems to stand with hardly any effort involved, it just seems to balance itself. It knows about its roots. It knows about its structure. And so you may adjust your posture so that you may feel the majesty and the stability and the grace. And why do I speak of grace? Because of the way in which the branches, they gently sway to the breeze that gently seems to pass through our branches. And then we notice through the presence that is the tree that the daylight turns into night and the night into day. And then we notice the many different forms of life that seem to pass underneath the branches, through the branches, the different nests, the chicks, the eggs that hatch and then they fly away, the squirrels and of course the people, many different, some young, some old, some with tears, some with laughter, so many different variables. The tree just observes. It notices, passing very little judgment. In fact, no judgment at all. And in the same way, could these changes also represent the different thoughts that we have? The different moods that we have, the different emotions that we experience. Never trying to stop and hold anyone back. Noticing the changing seasons. How in spring the blooms begin, the leaves begin to appear. Through the summer and then into the autumn when the leaves begin to yellow and fall away. Again we observe, we notice. And winter arrives. We feel light because the leaves have left. Constantly observing and noticing, releasing all need to control, releasing the need to control politics, economy, people, change, grounding ourselves even deeper into the roots underneath us. As we notice the storms arriving, the strong winds that seem to blow through our branches, But then we begin to understand how we've managed to stand here for these years, these decades, perhaps even hundreds of years, because of our ability to allow the winds of change to pass through our branches. And so we allow and we enjoy. The stronger the winds get, the more exhilarating it feels now, as we enter into a deeper and deeper state of allowing, completely releasing the need to control anything at all, releasing all those conditions. But then we do find conditions, don't we, that want things to be a certain way before we will allow ourselves the satisfaction of feeling a smile or happiness or contentment. And those are the rigid conditions, those rigid branches that refuse to bend, that seem to resist the wind. They feel uncomfortable. But as the other branches allow, we notice cracks beginning to appear, and all those branches that represented those conditions. And we begin to notice the cracks appearing. But just as we release those yellow leaves that we no longer needed, we allow the cracks to get bigger and bigger and bigger until they finally carry away these conditions that have kept us from smiling, from simply being happy, from that which we have come to know as the stillness which arrives with allowing. It's just relief. It just feels like relief, ease, comfort. And the storms, they pass. The clouds, they clear. The sun begins to shine. But we will not define or label this sunshine as good and the storms as bad. We simply observe. We simply notice and absorb ourselves deeper and deeper into the core that is this tree. The roots, the trunk, this witnessing presence. Quite separate from those changing thoughts. Quite separate from those smiles, laughter, and tears that passed underneath our branches. As we bring ourselves back to our breath. this balancing breath, wherein the tree releases oxygen, absorbing the carbon dioxide. And in our bodies, the exact opposite. It's balancing equivalent, absorbing the oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. This process we call breathing, with which we started with. And then we get a sense of ourselves sitting, and in a moment you will hear the sound of the bell, which will bring our practice. Which will bring this segment of our life to a close, and which will symbolize the beginning of a new segment. Where you will still carry this sense of awareness, this sense of presence with you, with me, as the day continues to unfold from moment to moment and breath to breath. Thank you all for joining me for that practice.